living fully alive in every way. You're listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol.
Hello, friends. It's Dr. Carol, and welcome once again to Relationship Prescriptions. As the summer is winding down, I've been taking a little extra time to regroup, refresh, and get ready for a very busy fall. And perhaps you're taking a bit of extra time too. We are going to share with you a best of this week, one of my favorite conversations from our podcast in the last year. Miles Adcox is a very special person to me. Miles is an entrepreneur, a counselor. He's the director of Onsite workshops. You'll hear more about all of that in our conversation. But some of the ideas and principles that Miles shares have been impactful to me personally. And one of those is, of course, taking time to refuel to make sure that our souls catch up with our bodies. That's what I'm doing right now. And perhaps this conversation will help you do the same. This conversation also got a little personal for me as Miles and I talked about some of my own experience in going through the death of my husband a few years ago. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Miles Adcox. I am truly honored today. I have a little bit of a celebrity awe at the moment. Our guest today is someone very special. Miles Adcox is an entrepreneur, a speaker, a host, and a coach. He's the owner and CEO of Onsite, an internationally known emotional wellness lifestyle brand, delivering life-changing personal growth events, inspiring content, emotional treatment, and more. Miles works at Onsite outside of Nashville, Tennessee. He has been featured on some really big programs like 2020, Good Morning America, in the Wall Street Journal, the Dr. Phil Show. Personally, Miles is known as one of the most plugged-in people on the human condition that there is there today. Miles, it is a great joy to have you on our program today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carol. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it is truly great. I have to just let our listeners know, I first found out about you only about a year ago, and I feel like I'm late to the party. I heard you on another podcast and have just been really blessed and inspired. I saw you in person in Atlanta a few months ago at a conference, and just your work has really been helpful to so many people, both individuals and leaders. And I just want to just dive in with the whole idea of emotional wellness. Now, for our audience, some may be familiar with that, some may not. And maybe you can just start us out with an idea of what we mean by that, emotional wellness.
Sure. Well, I like to call emotional wellness emotional fitness. And it's just a simple play on words, but from I think it speaks better to something that needs to be, you don't arrive at, it should be sustained, which is basically our emotional well-being and the way our mind functions and the way how in touch or not in touch we are with our emotions, especially in a culture that historically has been conditioned to not explore emotions or to experience the good ones and pretend the bad ones don't exist. And that has caused a world of trouble over the years, as we know. I think we're just now starting to learn what compounding stress does to our bodies and our minds. But I like to call it emotional fitness. And I just simply define that as power, understanding, strength, and empathy around your mood and feelings towards yourself and others. And the only reason fitness versus is wellness in both work is it's something I've learned that I have to maintain in the same way I do physical fitness. I don't just check it off the list and do therapy when life is not working well. And it may not be therapy. There's a lot of ways to arrive at emotional fitness, but I need to have a consistent practice.
I like that description, and it certainly points to the reality that this is an ongoing lifestyle. It's not just, like you said, something to check off. In my world, and for many of our listeners, coming from a Christian worldview, Christian perspective, this whole idea can sometimes raise some questions. And I think some in the Christian world have developed the idea that this whole idea of emotional fitness is not real consistent with their faith. Now, I don't agree with that perspective, but for our listeners who may wrestle with that kind of question, can you just unpack that a little, Miles? How does this idea fit with Christian faith?
Sure, it's a great question, and the same. I grew up in a faith and in a denomination that wasn't necessarily pro therapy or talking about problems or challenges. So it was a bit of a stretch early on for my wiring to be able to go there personally, and then obviously find a profession out of it. But the deeper that I got into what I understand the gospel to be now, which is kind of inclusive love, and if you take the greatest commandment, which is love the Lord our God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, that means that we're the greatest commandment is to love well. And I think in order to love well, we have to be holistically well, and we need to be able to love with all parts of ourselves, which requires us exploring and healing all parts of ourselves, not just the logical part. And I don't know that enough of I do know, because I've seen it with science, that enough of the right information doesn't create sustainable change alone. So we have to do more than just know. We have to be able to put it into practice.
Oh, as you say that, I can think of all kinds of New Testament scriptures, all kinds of things that Jesus said to back that up. Certainly true. So it's more than just knowing. I can think of, frankly, in my own family, as you just kind of alluded to, but I grew up seeing a lot of dysfunction in my own family and among others who said they were Christians. So it must be that just knowledge isn't enough.
The same, yeah, and a lot of, and I know this is in the faith communities, this can be a controversial position, but I'm careful not to, having studied human beings and understanding somewhat how the brain works. There is so much more I don't know and understand. There's people way smarter than me on the topic, but I'm careful not to box people into who they are and how they're wired based on what they believe. So, and I know it can be edgy, but I don't think you put Christians in a box and say, well, their brain is different because they have this faith. That's like saying their body's different or their organs are different. And I think we're all human, and I think God sees the humanness in all of us. As you know, I'm a believer, but I also have a lot of friends who come from different belief systems and other faiths, and they share very similar challenges, physically and psychologically. The brain is just another living organ, and I see it no different than when our physical bodies break down, so can our emotions and our mind break down. And we have to give each equal attention if we're to be whole and be able to live out, I think, what God calls us to do.
And you describing this as emotional fitness, I think it kind of fits what you're just saying. We don't believe as Christians that you don't have to eat healthy every day or you don't have to get physical exercise. Why would we think that our brain doesn't need regular care and wise actions and intentionality and all of that? We are human.
We are 100%. And and again, there's people smarter than me on the brain science side of psychology, and there's people smarter than me certainly in theology. So I don't feel like necessarily an expert in both, but I certainly have had a foot in both worlds. And I wouldn't want to defend this like a thesis to say, well, here's the scripture that my interpretation of it says this, or here's the science that says this. I'm just giving you a human experience for somebody who's been in the trenches with human beings, both Christian and non-Christian. And I've seen zero difference in the way people, we all experience adversity. And now I do think a secure spiritual faith system can give you an advantage in the healing process, but I don't think it alone works really well for some people. And there's a lot of people that need it in combination with other things. And I personally believe in an integrated approach to faith, and that let's learn everything that, God gifted a lot of really smart people with innovating and creating things that we all use to elevate our humanness. And I think we need to take advantage of them and build them into our faith so that we can become the best versions of who we are and reach more of the world from that place.
Thanks for talking about that, because I think that pathway to wellness, um, Christians need that just as much. I'd just like to hear you talk a little bit about the what is involved in getting from our suffering or our misery to a pathway to wholeness. I've seen some people that just feel like, well, I just have to put up with it, that their approach to whatever the diagnosis is, and frankly, I hate diagnoses because they tend to put people in boxes, but if it's depression or anxiety or one of these others or something unnamed, okay, I just got to put up with it. Can people really get past some of these things?
Of course, yeah. It's amazing some of the healing and resilience I've seen when people have a safe environment to be completely honest and transparent about their struggle. And when that's mirrored in received in an empathetic way, that alone is human to human contact, one person hearing in a non-judgmental ear and being able to hold up a mirror and support and empathize is enough. But surprisingly, that's not built into our culture. And I agree. There is certainly a need with the way the structure is built around behavioral health, but for diagnoses and the DSM allows people to get paid based on diagnoses, and it's all kind of anchored in insurance. But you got to remember, our behavioral health system is built on a sickness model. It's not built on a wellness model.
Wow.
It's back. It's in a sense, we build revenue by keeping people coming back, and keeping people coming back means keeping people sick. Same way that the healthcare system is built. We're not giving wellness advice to people when they come. They're starting to now. I just spent 2 days up at Mayo Clinic doing a executive physical myself, and most of the advice was not pharmaceutical related, or it was all eat better, sleep better, manage your stress. So we are finally backing into a wellness model, but for a long time, the financial model of behavioral and physical health has been around the money of keeping people sick. So I'm glad the paradigm is shifting. I agree with you, though, in theory, that labels can be hindering, and we're really careful not to label people. But it's not just labels and diagnoses. I think any label can be a little hindering. I've even seen some hindrance around the Christian label, and I'm Christian. But when we box ourselves into anything, even if it's a strong identity and belief system, we can neglect a viewpoint, a vantage point, and an empathetic disposition towards the rest of the world. So I think regardless of what labels serve us and what we anchor ourselves into, we need to make sure they don't limit our viewpoint towards the rest of the world.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. For somebody who is feeling stuck, whether it's a label or just mental unwellness, for whatever, however you want to phrase it, can you give some tips about, we know, yes, prayer is good, but in this emotional fitness space, what would be some places to begin if somebody just feels like they're in a mess, in a pit with all this right now?
I'm not one to be quick on advice. I think advice has its place, but I think people get more permission to be honest about their story and to share their struggle. Not if someone is standing up on top. I think when you ask the question, if someone's in a hole or in a pit, if someone's standing up on top of it, looking down in there and telling people what they need to do to climb out. I've always had better experience both on the receiving end and the giving end, as if somebody's willing to climb down in the pit with me and say, hey, I've been down here before and I know the way out. So I think find people who have had some life experience and who are willing to have the courage to share about some of their struggles. And so if I'm having marriage problems, I'm not one that looks at the most perfect marriage I've ever seen that's never had an issue to go to, because I don't trust it. But if I see somebody who's been honest that every marriage is difficult, every relationship is difficult, this has been ours, and here's been the beautiful parts, and here's been the parts that have been hard, that's where I'm going to go. We recently learned that psychological safety is the number one factor that would determine whether somebody can be honest about their shame and their story. And psychological safety is what you might make up. It's when someone believes and they feel connected to the person across from them. And connection being defined as when someone feels seen, heard, and valued without judgment, without agenda. And so I'll say this, if there's somebody out there struggling, there are more people out there than you think that can relate to where you are and that are where you are. That was one of the hardest things when I found myself in struggle years ago. Is the very first place I went was that I felt alone, and that's just where we go.
Right.
And we end up isolating more because we don't feel like no way anybody could understand us. And if we happen to share where we are, there's a good chance we're getting kicked out of the tribe. I have found as a person who is in emotional recovery and also as a professional for a long time who's facilitated this, is that I had no idea what a tribe was until I got honest with my story. I had, and when I started getting honest with my story and getting real and allow myself to be seen, the shiny parts and the ugly parts and the challenging parts, then I felt true connection, and then I built true community, and it's been a life-changing experience, and I know you can do it too.
Wow. You're talking about vulnerability, and just listening to you, I'm getting the sense that you still are practicing that, Miles, that is just a part of the lifestyle that you have grown because you've seen what a difference that makes both for you and others. Would that be fair, that you are choosing vulnerability even now yourself?
It is fair. I choose it I choose it now, but I'm still human, so I still have a natural instinct to resist it. So, however, vulnerability, we don't really choose vulnerability, it chooses us. And it's going to catch up with us at some point, whether we decide to embrace it or not. And if you look at it through just being honest about who we are, now clearly I was somebody that when I began to see the opportunities and the benefit of vulnerability, I kind of overdid it. I'll be honest. I didn't quite understand what felt okay to share and not share, and it was an unconscious thing. And I see a lot of people doing this today. And I'm who knows, I may make that mistake from a stage sometime soon when I'm getting offered to teach or speak. It's very human of us. But when you start to realize that this next generation, the millennials and the X's, they're not going to accept anything but authenticity, transparency, and truth. They want vulnerability. And I think I've seen really effective communicators who know how to read audiences. They see that vulnerability is selling now, and so they manufacture it as a way to try to get affirmation and connect. And I did that too. I made that mistake when I was sharing for the sake of sharing instead of just being anchored in these are things that I've overcome. So I try to be careful not to manufacture it. I try to be careful that if I am sharing a part of my story, that it's one in which I've already sought support in and have a little bit of resolution in, that it's not. Now, if it were me talking to you offline, friend to friend, I would probably get more raw. But knowing that this is something that's public and going to an audience, I don't want to do it just to seek an unmet need. I want to make sure I'm doing it because it's a truthful part of my story. But do I subscribe to that life? Absolutely, because it's been a game changer for me. And I think that is the way we are headed. And thank goodness, because the construct of trying to keep it together and not allowing permission for us to be human. I've frankly been on the other end of the phone from way too many influential people, a lot of pastors who never had that permission to do that, they had to be a certain perception and persona at all costs, and they crashed and burned because of it. So yes, I'm a big proponent of it.
This sounds like an important thing for anybody who is or wants to be married too. And this is something I had not specifically thought about asking you, but um, Miles, in my own experience, I did not get married until I was in my 40s, in part because I don't. If I had gotten married before then, I think it would have been a mess. Um, Growing up as I did, I needed that level of maturity. But once I did get married, that was even a whole nother level um, of being seen at a vulnerable level. It ended up being a very healing thing for me. I know not all marriages are that way, but just the whole emotional fitness and connection with people in that kind of intimate relationships is something I don't think many people really go into marriage prepared for. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I've got some thoughts, but first I can really relate to what you're
Mm,
sharing. I appreciate you sharing it. And it's a perfect example. I know we've had limited time together. I think, we met briefly, as you said, in Atlanta.
right.
Uh, and so me, just human to human, if we were to strip this back, I don't know you. I respect your profession and what you've done. I know you've done some great things, but just you sharing a little bit about your story right there, it, I literally leaned forward in my chair
Mm,
and I felt like, okay, I trust her. And you see, that's just the power of vulnerability. And it made me want to talk to you and share more of my story. So I just wanted to point that example out because I think it's important based on the last question you asked. But to answer this one, I relate on a number of levels because I too got married late and haven't been married that long. And I think a lot of people assume because I head up an emotional wellness, emotional health retreat center that I've had relationships perfected for a long time, and that's not the case. Uh, I had a lot of the data, and this goes back to the first question you asked. I had a lot of the data, and so I was well studied, and I could tell you the ABCs of how to do relationship, but knowing it and doing it are two different things.
yeah.
And I needed to get into the experience, but I also had the same experience you did in that I waiting for me ended up being the right decision. And I didn't know it wasn't a conscious decision because I just, had I been able to get married when culture told me I was supposed to in my early 20s, like everybody else, then I probably would have done it. But I think it might have been a mistake for me. I think and as you said, I think I'd have been a little bit of me coming into my marriage more mature. It was a two-part thing. One, I've been doing what I've been doing for a long time, so it was really vulnerable because I'm having to change things to coexist with another person. But the second part was I've got the tools to do that now because I've got enough
Yes.
life under my belt that I've experienced adversity and come through it and know how to navigate some of those challenges a little different. So it's been a lot of people have said to me along the way, it's about time. And I always say it wasn't about time, it was the right time.
Uh-huh. Oh, thanks for that too. I occasionally see you post a picture of you and your wife or you and your son, and I understand another child is on the way. I was never blessed to have biological children, but I imagine that whole journey has got to be uh, pretty amazing for you.
It's been unbelievable. And I will say, my wife and I both um, we love aesthetics and photography and art. And so, Instagram feeds, we're like anybody else. We're drawn to pretty pictures, and
Yeah.
pretty moments, but that our life is not all Instagram worthy. I try to balance that out. I probably could do a little better job of it. But a lot of times if you were to just look at the feed and see the perfect picture of us in a field somewhere holding our baby, it's like, man, they got the perfect life. And we do have a beautiful life. Don't get me wrong. However, but we bump into each other all the time. And that's just I'm learning that's part of being in a healthy relationship. When people tell me they've never argued, I get really worried.
And that's a downside of social media too, as I think we all know. Well, Miles, I want to save a couple minutes for you to talk a little bit about Onsite. I have to tell you that listening to you on I've heard a couple podcast interviews that you've done, and then hearing you in person in Atlanta and meeting you, there's something in my soul that says, yeah, even though I'm at this point of maturity and I have grown a lot, I feel some rough edges, and frankly, I have a desire one of these days. I may just come to Onsite myself. Talk a little bit about the work that you do there and who can benefit.
Sure. We have kind of three distinct arms of our offerings. And the one that a lot of people know us for is, I think the one you're referencing, is our workshops. And so we do a lot of emotional health workshops that are between 4 to 7 days. The second arm is I've got a longer term option of emotional health treatment that specializes in trauma, depression, anxiety. And that would be for people who are in a little bit more of a struggle. In other words, life is pretty hard at this point to navigate based on some experiences I've had in the past or just recently. And then the third, we have our foundation, which we're doing trauma informed education and disaster relief services in our country and a little bit in some others. But the first one, the one that is kind of what a lot of people know us for, is I'm glad you said that, because I too feel like I've done a lot of work and feel like personal work, emotional work, healing work, spiritual work, but I want to continue to pursue it. I think if we rested spiritually and said, I think I'm good, I don't need to do any more Bible studies or no more church or no more small group,
No.
that'd be a problem. And
Yes.
so same principle with emotional health. I think if we ever get to a point where we're like, I'm good, I think for a long time, therapy has been branded all wrong. I've said this before, in that it was set up that this is where you go when something's wrong with you. And it's actually what's right with you, that you would go become a better version of who you are. It's not what's wrong with you. And the same goes with church. It's set up to where this is what's right with you if you go here. So therefore, if anything's wrong with you, you're never going to want to go there and talk about it. I think we've got to level the playing field with both of those and see that this is just a resource that we as human beings need. We need spirituality and faith in God in our life and a consistent spiritual practice. We need emotional health and safe human beings that we can tell our story to, not once, but something consistent. So we have a lot of people, me being one of them, who do a tune-up every year. So I do one of our own workshops every year and have been doing that for 10 years. And so, yeah, I'd love to have you come sometime. And I think people do misunderstand that. A lot of times they think, oh man, stress has to be high, major life transition, I have to be dealing with some kind of mental health challenge in order to come benefit. And that's not the case. A lot of people just come to raise their emotional intelligence, to do a technology detox, or just to take a look at what parts of their narrative aren't working for them and try to sort that out. So,
Well, I have discovered, as God has brought people into my world to speak to, and a lot of my work is online right now, but I end up talking to people with some really, really big life challenges. And I find that things I've gone through are often the most impactful. So the areas where I am still undone, the areas where I still can get more fit, I feel like every time I grow more, I have more to offer, like going through the death of my husband almost 3 years ago. Going through that grief process, as excruciating as it was, there's something more I have to offer now. And it's not only to people who are grieving. There's just something that happens in me as I do that work. And there's just something in me that's hungry for more. So I am just thrilled that you make that kind of place available.
Oh, thank you. I'm certainly honor what was your husband's name?
Al Tanksley.
Al, okay.
Yes.
Certainly honor. I don't skip over that part. Honor his loss, and I know grief is one of those things done well. You don't really finish it. You just kind of stay connected to it, and but given permission to go through it, it sounds like you have been. Then certainly, yeah, you can come out even stronger, or in some ways more informed on the other side. There's a movement in something called positive psychology where they call it post-traumatic growth instead of post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's true. I've seen people who have gone through adverse life circumstances and given themselves permission biologically for the body to heal appropriately and go through a grief process or whatever might be the case, and come out more resilient, more connected, more present, more alive, more spiritual on the other side.
I have experienced that in my own life. And frankly, I'll just lend my 2 cents on the theology side. I think that's where the miracle working power of God comes. He can take what truly was meant for destruction and work in us to make something of meaning. It's not that he ever wishes our pain. I believe that firmly. But faith is a powerful way in coming through some of those places to bring meaning out of it.
Yeah, well said. I really like that. And I concur. People, I think people assume because I'm in my space and that I was in mainstream, kind of psychology prior to even getting back into the faith space, that I would be one of those that would be opposed to the idea that you can actually heal with your faith and in church and with other believers. And I really think you can. I'm cautious of and careful when I hear people say, if you've got depression, just pray it away. And I think that's dangerous. It's like telling you to do that with cancer and not get treatment. But I think if you have a really good community of people who are living the message, not just studying it. I don't think Jesus ever wanted us to just study him. I think he wanted us to live like him. Then together you create what we create in therapeutic circles, which shouldn't just be saved for the therapy room. It should be practiced in community, that we have safe people we can talk to and be honest with one another and heal together.
What I'm hearing you say, Miles, is just like people who eat healthy and exercise well are more likely to be physically fit. It doesn't matter whether it's in your church community or in some other setting. People who have a place of emotional safety, to use a phrase you talked about, will be more emotionally fit than those who don't. It's just those things work. It's part of the way we're created.
100%. And I don't think spiritual health and emotional health, and I know I've got friends who could probably throw several verses at this and back it up, and you may be able to, but it's just my theory. I don't think spiritual health and emotional health are that far apart. I think they're pretty intertwined. I just think we've separated them for a long time. But I think this next generation is giving us an opportunity, and it's not just them. I think a lot of people who are awake and evolving are finding real opportunity to connect the two, and how we become a more whole person out of this. It seems like that was the invitation from God to begin with.
Wow. I feel like, Miles, we could talk a long time. It has truly been an honor. If somebody wants to find out more about you, about your work, about Onsite, how can they find out more?
I communicate right now primarily on socials. I am working on a book that I hope I'll have ready to go, within a year. But for now, I do writing. I was doing blogs for a while, and then it was too much to keep up with. So I do writing on Instagram at Miles Adcox are all my social feeds, and then at Onsite Workshops are our social feeds. And then our websites are Miles Adcox and onsiteworkshops.com. So you could find us there, and it'll have information about what we do and what we're up to.
Thanks so much. And we'll make sure that those links are in the show notes for this episode, the social links and the website links. It's been a joy. It's been an honor. Thanks so much, Miles, for joining us on this program. It's been great.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll. It was a real honor. I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, friends, I hope that encouraged you, that it doesn't matter what angst you're feeling or challenges you're facing, that experiencing emotional fitness is possible. There are steps that you and I can take in moving forward, even when things get difficult. If you want to find out more about some of Miles' other resources, check out the show notes. His website, Onsite Workshops websites. We've got links to his social media, and I think you will want to connect with Miles and his resources if you have not already done so. Thank you again for being part of our podcast family. I also want to mention that our new online community is growing and doing well, our Fully Alive Group online community. And I just want to take a moment to invite you again to come check us out and consider being a part of this special premium community, fullyalivegroup.com. We just spent a month going through some specific teachings and conversations around the area of mental emotional wholeness. And if you become a member of the Fully Alive group, you can access all of that premium content that we have archived there. So I encourage you to do that. If you have questions, feel free to send me a comment or question on our website, and I would love to hear from you. And now, until next time, may God bless you.
Thank you for listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol. Our purpose is to provide trustworthy resources that help you and others live fully alive in every way as God intended. If you would like to help others experience transformation in their lives and relationships, we invite you to partner with us. Text the word GIVE, that's GIVE, to the number 512-980-1620. Or visit our website at drcarolministries.com/donate to make a one-time contribution or monthly gift. Your financial support allows us to expand our message and to help others. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.